This is the story of Paul Massey.
You've just seen it. A few seconds of raw footage. A young man in a tracksuit screaming at someone off camera, his face twisted in anger. A quiet London street suddenly filled with tension. At first glance, it looks like another street argument, but then you hear the name Joel March and everything changes. He wasn't famous, not yet, but in the corners of South London, March's name carried weight. Part-time rapper, full-time problem. He ran with crews that didn't bluff, moved with people who didn't talk, and played a game where respect was earned with silence or violence. And Joel, he chose both. Behind that outburst on camera was a teenager already deep in the life. Encrypted phones, postcode beefs, guns passed hand to hand. By the time the police pieced it all together, a teenager had been gunned down and Joel March was on the run. What followed was a digital trail of messages, a crew that folded under pressure, and one of the most calculated takedowns of a young London gang figure in years. This is the story of rage, reputation, and revenge. This is the rise and fall of Joel March. Joel March didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He was a product of South London's fractured postcodes, where loyalty was often tested and opportunities came with strings attached. Born in the early 2000s, he was raised in a part of London where council flats were stacked like bricks and stairwells doubled as smoking spots, hiding places, and gang headquarters. His early childhood was marked by the usual chaos: absent father, overstretched mother, and an education system that flagged him more for disruption than potential. Teachers saw the signs: late attendance, explosive temper, and an eagerness to challenge authority. But the streets saw something else. A young man looking for respect and ready to earn it however he could. Joel wasn't an instant gangster. He started small, watching older boys post outside chicken shops, run errands, flash their phones. They had everything he didn't: money, power, attention. By the time he was 14, Joel was already running drops, weed in Ziplocs, burner phones in his backpack, and instructions barked at him through encrypted messages. The jump from street runner to certified gang member came quickly. He started affiliating with a local crew known as Seven Side, a group that operated out of Brixton and was locked in an ongoing feud with a rival set across the river. The wars weren't just about drugs, they were about postcode pride, retaliations, and viral notoriety. March didn't just want to follow orders, he wanted to be seen. He began uploading drill tracks online, throwing indirects at rivals and flexing with friends. The lyrics were coded, violent, and often laced with real-life references to stabbings, gunplay, and revenge. His online persona grew. He wasn't Joel March anymore, he was JM, the aggressive voice behind bars that blurred the line between rap and confession. But while his tracks climbed in views, so did the bodies. The beef between March's set and their rivals turned lethal. Stabbings at chicken shops, ambushes outside schools, and Snapchat clips of bloody tracksuits became disturbingly common. Joel wasn't just watching anymore, he was participating. And he was smart about it. He used encrypted phones, usually Sky, ECC, or EncroChat, and avoided being seen too often in music videos. In public, he kept a low profile. No flashy designer fits, no chains, just tracksuits, hoodies, and a paranoid look over the shoulder. But paranoia doesn't always protect you. By the 18th, March was already on the Met's radar. He'd been stopped and searched multiple times, tagged in gang matrices, and linked through association to at least 2 known violent offenders. Still, there wasn't enough to arrest him, and that's when things escalated. One phone call, one threat, one decision made in a fit of rage. Joel March crossed the line, not in a song, not on Snapchat, but in real life. A teenager from the rival set was targeted. The plan was brutal: roll up in a stolen car, mask up, pull the trigger, and vanish. What they didn't count on was the cameras. It happened fast, like most things do in London's street wars. The stolen BMW had been circulating around South London for days. Cloned plates, wiped down for prints, registered to no one. Inside, 4 masked individuals sat in silence, each one clutching gloves, phones, and in one case, a firearm. Joel March was in the back seat, hood up, eyes fixed. His phone buzzed. A single message: he's there. The target was a 19-year-old known affiliate of the rival set. He wasn't famous, but he'd made noise in recent weeks. mocking Joel's crew in an Instagram story that had gone semi-viral. It was typical gangbait, emojis, postcode references, and a few veiled threats. For March, it was personal. The BMW cruised down the street slowly. It was mid-afternoon. Children were walking home from school. A couple of locals sat outside a cafe, unaware that they were about to witness a murder. The target stood on the corner, scrolling his phone. He looked up just once, and that's when the BMW braked. March leaned out of the rear window. There was no warning, no words, just 4 deafening cracks. The teenager dropped immediately. 2 bullets had struck his torso, another clipped his leg, the 4th tore into a parked car's windshield. Chaos erupted, people screamed, some ducked, others ran. Within seconds, the BMW sped off, tires screeching, vanishing into the labyrinth of London back streets. But they hadn't vanished completely. Several CCTV cameras captured the car before and after the shooting. Footage showed the vehicle idling around the estate earlier that day and later speeding through junctions with complete disregard. Police were on the scene within minutes. Paramedics tried everything, but the victim was pronounced dead before they reached the hospital. The media was quick to respond. Headlines labeled it another postcode killing, a tragic result of gang violence that had become all too common. But behind the scenes, the Met's Trident Gang Crime Command had already begun building a case. They canvassed the area, retrieved footage, and pulled digital records. A witness mentioned a grey BMW. A camera caught part of the license plate. And just 2 days later, they found the car burned out in a Southwark industrial estate. That should have been the end of the trail. But March made a mistake. He'd messaged someone on his second phone, a device believed to be secure, but the recipient had been under surveillance for months. The message, done. 4 shots, he's gone. That one line gave police all they needed to connect Joel to the killing. Surveillance was stepped up. His known hangouts were watched. His music accounts were monitored. One officer described it as a digital noose slowly tightening. When police finally moved in, it was quiet. No raids, no foot chases. March was picked up walking alone, just a few streets from his mum's flat. He didn't resist, he didn't speak, but in his pocket was a cracked iPhone, and what they'd find on it would blow the case wide open. The iPhone they found in Joel March's pocket was nothing special. Old model, cracked screen, no lock screen wallpaper, just a black background. But to the detectives on the Trident unit, it was pure gold. March had grown careful over the years. He used encrypted apps, switched phones frequently, and avoided storing anything incriminating in his camera roll. But like many in his world, he made one critical mistake, and he thought encryption meant immunity. The phone was quickly seized and sent to the digital forensics unit. Within 48 hours, they'd bypassed basic security. And that's when things started unraveling. Despite his paranoia, Joel had been using a now-defunct encrypted messaging app that claimed to auto-delete conversations. What he didn't know was that residual chat data was still buried in the phone's memory. Forensic analysts reconstructed threads, piecing together entire conversations from cache files and screenshots saved by the people he was messaging. The chats painted a damning picture. Voice notes planning the hit, photos of the cloned license plates, and one grainy selfie showing March holding what appeared to be the exact same Glock used in the drive-by, time-stamped just 24 hours before the shooting. But that wasn't all. Police found links between Joel and at least 3 other unsolved incidents: a knife attack near Croydon, a robbery involving acid threats, and a suspected intimidation campaign targeting witnesses in another gang trial. While they couldn't pin all of it on him, the sheer weight of circumstantial evidence was enough to push for a murder charge. The Met moved quickly. They arrested 2 more suspected crew members. One flipped almost immediately, offering statements in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed Joel had been bragging about the hit just hours after it happened, calling it necessary work. In his words, JM said it had to be done. Mandem were laughing about it. In court, prosecutors built a timeline. The stolen BMW, the burner phone, the voice notes. They played Joel's drill tracks for the jury, with lyrics that mirrored real-life events too closely to be ignored. Lines about rolling up in a Beamer, about making bodies drop and tires spin, suddenly sounded less like music and more like motive. Joel's defense tried to argue artistic expression, that he was just repeating what others rapped about. that there was no forensic evidence linking him directly to the trigger, but the jury wasn't convinced. The combination of CCTV footage, phone data, witness testimony, and March's own digital trail painted a story too detailed and too deliberate to be coincidence. In less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with a unanimous verdict. Guilty of murder, guilty of possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life, guilty of participating in a criminal enterprise. For a teenager who once thought he could game the system with encrypted apps and coded lyrics, reality had come crashing down. But the story wasn't quite over yet. The day Joel March was convicted, something strange happened. There weren't mass protests, no drill songs dropped in defiance, no social media campaigns demanding justice. Instead, there was silence, eerie, heavy, and tense. The streets of South London weren't mourning Joel March. They were bracing for what came next. Because when a gang member gets locked up for life, the streets don't just forget. Old alliances get tested, power vacuums appear, and most dangerously, revenge plots start brewing. March wasn't just another foot soldier, he was a known face in his set, someone with pull, someone who had made enemies and inspired younger kids to step up in his place. Almost immediately, police noticed a spike in tit-for-tat violence. A stabbing in Peckham, a gun recovered in Tulse Hill, cryptic posts on Snapchat and Instagram featuring red circle emojis, maps, and devil faces. The message was clear, it wasn't over. Inside Joel's own crew, tensions began to rise. Some blamed him for bringing too much attention, others saw him as a martyr, the soldier who went down doing real work. Either way, the unity started to crack. His absence exposed weak links. Some of his closest friends disappeared from the ends, either out of fear or because they were next in the Met's sights. At the same time, community leaders and youth outreach workers tried to use Joel's story as a warning. Schools in the area were briefed, anti-violence posters went up, one charity ran a workshop titled "From Drill to Jail, the Joel March Case Study." It was a noble effort, but to many teenagers caught in the cycle, March's downfall was more legend than lesson. He rode out and got nicked, one 15-year-old said in a BBC Street interview. It's peak, but man did what he had to do. Even in prison, Joel remained connected. Messages leaked from inside suggested he was still trying to exert influence, passing instructions through coded letters and prison calls routed through relatives. He'd bragged to fellow inmates about the madness on the roads after his sentencing and claimed he'd be out on appeal. But the reality was bleak. The judge had handed him a life sentence with a minimum term of 28 years. He'd be pushing 50 by the time parole was even an option, and the streets he knew would be long gone by then. Still, the violence didn't stop. Over the following year, 5 more stabbings and 2 shootings were loosely linked to March's set, either as revenge acts, power moves, or internal cleanups. Police continued to clamp down, raiding addresses, seizing phones, and making quiet arrests. But like most gang conflicts in London, this one didn't end with a single sentence, it just evolved. Joel March had been removed from the streets, but the postcode war, the coded messages, the encrypted phones, the online taunts kept breathing. For many in South London, Joel's story was a warning, but for others, it was inspiration. Long after Joel March's sentencing, his name still echoed through the streets, not just in whispers, but in verses. Months after the trial, a track surfaced on YouTube under a new alias. The video was dark, grainy, filmed in a stairwell with masks and hoods concealing every face. But the lyrics, crystal clear. They locked bro for the .9 clip, said he spun it, said he dipped. But Free JM, he made Ops Trip. The song didn't get millions of views, but it got the right views, the kind that build reputation. The initials JM were now more than just a name. They were a brand, stamped into street mythology. Like so many before him, March had gone from local menace to underground legend, not because of what he built, but because of what he destroyed. Young boys, 13, 14, 15 years old, who barely knew him in person, started adopting the name. Free JM tags showed up on underpasses and housing block walls. Some even wore it stitched into custom tracksuits. For them, Joel's story wasn't a tragedy. It was proof that you could rise from nothing, be feared, and make the news, even if only for a moment. And that's what makes the story dangerous. March's legacy wasn't money or power, it was mythology. A distorted version of success passed down through half-truths and postcode pride. What the drill tracks didn't show were the visits to court, the family crying behind him, the four walls of a cell that he would call home for the next 3 decades. Police tried to counter the narrative. They made Joel an example, part of every school presentation, every hard talk with at-risk youth. But the more they used his face as a warning, the more others saw him as a badge of honor. The more they tried to bury his name, the more it spread. There were consequences too. Joel's younger brother, just 16, was stabbed outside a chicken shop 6 months after the sentencing. He survived. Barely. Police suspected it was retaliation from the same rival set involved in the original beef, but no one was charged. No one ever talks. Meanwhile, in prison, Joel kept his head down. At least on the surface. There were reports of him clashing with other inmates, including one who allegedly tried to test his rep. He was transferred twice in under a year. His name appeared briefly on a leaked prison gang list coded under high risk, high influence. Despite the lockup, March still held weight. Through letters, phone calls, and music, his voice lingered. The most chilling part, his story wasn't unique. London's prisons are filled with young men just like Joel, smart, sharp, and deadly, raised on survival, fueled by music, and destroyed by pride. The streets remember names, but they often forget the reality behind them. And Joel March, he became both. Before the bloodshed, before the postcode feuds and encrypted messages, Joel March had other dreams. He wanted to make it in music, not in the cliché rapper-turned-trapper sense, but genuinely. He was sharp with words. His flows were clean. There were clips from back in the day. Him at 16, headphones on, spitting bars in a friend's bedroom, grinning as the beat dropped. People around him said it all the time. He could have gone legit. His early tracks weren't all about violence. There were verses about struggle, about family, even about escaping the roads. But that version of Joel didn't last long. Because the music that got clicks, the stuff that made numbers, was darker. And Joel adapted. Drill became his diary, and soon drill became his downfall. Now those dreams are just echoes in a concrete cell. At HMP Belmarsh, Joel March is just another name on a list. Another young man locked into the system, waiting out decades. His routines are painfully repetitive. Early wake-up, chores, 23 hours inside on some days. Letters arrive from the outside, mostly from old friends, a few from girls he barely remembers. The music? It's gone. He's not recording, not legally anyway, but rumors say he's still writing. Verses scribbled on prison paper, passed between cells like currency. There are still those who believe he'll come out and blow, that he'll do the road to redemption route, music career, interviews, books. But that's fantasy. Joel won't see freedom until he's nearly 50. And by then, the drill scene will have evolved far beyond him. Outside, the world keeps spinning. Postcodes change, crews fade, and new names step into old shoes. The streets rarely wait. But for all the evolution, the cycle stays the same. Boys looking up to ghosts, kids carrying blades in school bags, mimicking the moves of men they've never met. Men like Joel March. He became a cautionary tale, a cultural symbol, and a tragic statistic all in one. In interviews, detectives now use his case to highlight how digital trails trap young offenders. They show juries how a line in a song, a blurred CCTV face, or a message on a wiped phone can unravel a whole operation. Joel's case is a blueprint, not just for gang policing, but for understanding how reputation can ruin a life before it begins. And still, somewhere in the heart of South London, you can find his name scrawled on a wall, a message in red marker. Free JM. Not many walking past it know who he really was. Fewer remember the victim, and fewer still care about how it all ended. But the cell, it remembers the silence, the bars, the weight of 100 decisions. Joel March is still alive, but the life he wanted, the fame, the respect, the music that died long before the prison gates closed behind him.